Welcome to another edition of Forecast Lab. Hot weather continues in Texas with temperatures in the 90s. However, in California, a very powerful weather system making its way through Los Angeles, and we have record precipitable water and upper level height values in terms of low and high values. So we'll cover all that shortly. Let's take a look in the tropics. This weekend, we saw Tropical Storm Karen in the northeastern Atlantic, and now we have Tropical Storm Lorenzo very far out there, and we're expecting rapid recurvature. So that's not going to be a factor in the western part of the basin, and we have nothing else in the foreseeable future. Here is what the GFS is showing. There goes Lorenzo being picked up by that strong belt of prevailing westerlies, and just nothing really in the Cape Verde storm track further south or in the Caribbean. But sometime next week, we do see a little bit of activity picking up with this easterly wave crossing the Windward Islands around Sunday. And this could spin up a storm maybe late next week. Now, this is 204 hours out, so this is crystal ball territory. But you can see at the very end of the period, the model is trying to spin up a tropical storm or hurricane in the western Caribbean. And if that happens, that does bear some possibility of making it into the Gulf and into the U.S. But we're just going to have to look at that later. We don't really have much to go on, but it is something at least. Checking out the weather over the lower 48 this afternoon, a powerful weather system moving through California. That's comprised of a occlusion over the central California coast, an occluded front across the western part of Nevada, and this triple point somewhere around Barstow or Baker, cold front further south towards San Diego. And this is a classic antifront setup, and that means extensive precipitation back over the frontal boundary. That strong warm air advection getting some lift over the front, and with that extensive precipitation through the LA area into the Sierras, and we do have winter storm warnings in that part of the country. Elsewhere, the remains of Tropical Storm Priscilla and Raymond extending into Colorado, New Mexico, parts of Kansas and the Central Plains, and there is some interaction with this frontal boundary extending from the Ozarks into the Denver area, and with that precipitation even further to the northeast. Northerly flow across the eastern U.S., cold advection all the way into the Carolinas. Very cool day with temperatures in the 60s in that part of the country and 50s as you go into New York and New England. In that part of the country, we did have a coastal low that we were contending with for a few days, so extensive remnant precipitation across the coastal areas. Yesterday, Poughkeepsie, New York, located about right there, 2.03 inches for a daily record. Atlantic City, 2.11. For today, mild temperatures, 60s in most areas, and 70s in western Virginia, West Virginia, and Ohio. And in the Midwest, we pick up widespread 70s in southern Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and even 80s from Evansville to St. Louis, Paducah, and the Ozarks. Scattered coastal flooding continues from North Carolina to around New York. As a small nor'easter moves out to sea, conditions are improving today, and we have a high surf advisory still posted along the Maine coast from 8 p.m. until 8 p.m. for 5 to 7 foot breaking waves. Across the southeastern U.S., clear skies in most areas. Some cold air advection stratocumulus continues across North Carolina, where we find those 60s temperatures, 70s throughout the central Carolinas and Blue Ridge Mountains, and 80s elsewhere. The hot spot this afternoon, Tampa expecting 88 degrees, and of course western Louisiana expecting low 90s near Shreveport. Much of the southern Florida coast around Miami, Jupiter to the Keys, including West Palm Beach, that area under a coastal flood statement until 6 p.m. Isolated flooding in the low-lying areas along the beach there. They may get 6 to 12 inches of inundation. In Texas, a low-grade heat wave continues with 90s from Houston to San Antonio, 88 degrees in DFW. We look at the 500 millibar anomalies for this morning, looking at the heights there. Texas is in the all-time, for this time of year, values, 594 decameter high in that area. And you contrast that with California, they're looking at all-time minimums. So what does that mean? That means hot weather for Texas, and the zone right here, this forms a gate, which means enhanced southwesterly flow. When you have this anomalous pressure gradient like that, that means you're going to have anomalous flow right in between, and that's helping to loft that moisture northward. We're going to look at that shortly. But there it is, the anomalous 500 millibar heights with the center of the high pressure area around Waco, Texas, and we get that clockwise flow around that. And further to the west, there's that moisture. And we do have precipitable water values in the 99th percentile, close to all-time records for this time of year across eastern New Mexico, the western panhandles, and much of Kansas. There's the precipitable water, the blue right there in eastern New Mexico. That means maximum at 18Z ever recorded in this data set, and 1979 to 2009. That's going to be a moving, what is that, maybe a 3-week window, with this green area indicating 99.5 percentile, so that's certainly statistically significant, all the way there from central New Mexico into southern Nebraska. And the general trend on this, we're going to spread most of the moisture to the north, so very little reaches Texas and Oklahoma, but in the Dakotas, 99.5 percentile by Thursday. So they're going to be getting a pretty good amount of precipitation across the northern plains, and gradually that expands into Minnesota and Ontario by Friday. For today, however, extensive cloudiness, lots of isotropic lift north of that frontal boundary, producing layers of stratus, nimbostratus, altocumulus, cirrus, and the works. Cold air was in place in the Dakotas, highs in the 40s there, 50s extended into Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, 60s to about Des Moines, northern Kansas, and 60s and 70s in Colorado, where we are on the nose of that warm air advection from the southwest. As we mentioned, high precipitable water values across this entire area of the Central Plains. Those will be expanding northward over the next couple of days. And we'll be looking at increasing chances for storms in the northwestern high plains between Denver and Bismarck. That's going to be for tomorrow, near the nose of that moisture. Across the southwestern U.S., remember those height anomalies, one in Texas, the other in California, and we've got wide open southerly flow all through the southwest. Ironically, highs today only in the low 80s in the deserts, 70s in the plateau regions. We pick up lots of 50s in the western Great Basin area, close to that deep system in California, all that cloud cover, wet bulbing, and so on. We do have a flood watch for parts of southwestern Colorado, the Durango area, the mountains to the north and east through late tonight. Excessive rainfall is possible. And we have a marginal risk of severe weather in parts of New Mexico, right along that moisture axis, and of course, near that active frontal system there in California, another marginal risk for the Los Angeles and Orange County area. Let me take this a little bit further to the west, and you can get a better look at that weather system. The water vapor channel does also show some detail. That shows that intense vortex right there along the central California coast. Some dry air advection starting to enter the Los Angeles area, but still significant amounts of moisture in the lower levels, helping to produce a couple of lines of convection right there. Looks like things are starting to improve a bit, though, and we should see possibly a improvement trend going into this evening. There's the radar. It's showing the heavier convective elements in this area right here. There is some blocking by the mountains. So basically from Riverside down through Orange County, maybe just to the east of there. And we've got this couple of more bands moving in from the west, but those appear to be a bit drier. But I do think things are improving for the Los Angeles area. Most of the problems are entering the mountains just east of Riverside and into the San Diego area. Looks like they're getting some of that convection starting to approach. Let me try pulling up the San Diego radar, see if we can get a better look at that. And yeah, certainly some showers and storms right there. Tops are up to, yeah, they're pretty shallow. They're generally below 15,000 feet, but still some heavy rain possible within those cells. Plenty of rain in Central California. They are getting extensive precipitation across the Sierras and lots of cold core convection all through the central San Joaquin Valley, and even a severe thunderstorm warning right here. Northwestern Monterey County looking for a severe thunderstorm with gusty winds and quarter-sized hail. We do have a massive winter storm warning covering all the Sierras that runs tonight into Wednesday, up to a foot of snow expected as far north as just northeast of Oroville Lake. So it doesn't really cover the northern part of the mountains. It pretty much stops right there just north of Interstate 90. We are looking for most of the snow problems to be above 6,500 feet, and that winter storm warning, it includes US 395 from Bishop right through here to Topaz Lake. Lake Tahoe expecting about 1 to 3 inches of snow. Higher elevations could see 6 to 12 inches. Looking pretty good in the Pacific Northwest. We saw cool conditions with lower 60s west of the Cascades and 50s east of the Cascades, 40s in the mountains. No warnings or watches, however, we do have a frost advisory in most of the Moses Lake area tonight and Wednesday night. Temperatures will be dropping into the low 30s. And we head out into the Pacific, and we do have a 1026 millibar high out there, well west of Washington. Very compact, powerful weather system moving towards Yakutat, Skagway, and Haines, and we do have a high wind warning for Skagway located right there. That south wind will be funneling through those straits, gusting to 60 miles an hour today and this evening, and that low pressure area will be tracking across southern Yukon. Gale warnings are in effect for Wednesday all through the Gulf of Alaska. This powerful weather system will be making its way eastward. And there's a look at what will be going on. There's round one heading into Yukon this evening, and here we go with this second system right there in the eastern Aleutians tonight and into early tomorrow. South flow, southeast, and east flow really picking up there. Rain bands smashing onto the south and southeast coast. Later tomorrow, we're probably going to see warnings and maybe some watches out there, maybe some flood watches. This will be kind of a long-duration event in the Alaska Panhandle going into Thursday and Friday with that strong onshore component. And gradually we see some improvement by Friday. And yeah, there's the Canadian charts. We'll take a quick look at that. Here's that first system that will be bringing some snow to parts of the Northwest Territories around Wednesday as it tracks eastward. Here's this next more powerful system in the Gulf of Alaska. And we get a couple of systems moving into the British Columbia and Washington coast this weekend. And that will be tracking across the prairies and weakening going into midweek. Another round coming into southeastern Alaska for midweek next week, and also hitting British Columbia for Wednesday. So getting very active in this corridor right here. And of course that will gradually shift more and more to the south as we get deeper into the cool season. Now, some of you have not seen this chart in a while. This is a temperature chart for Canada, the Arctic, and Alaska. So we're starting out rather warm. In fact, we've got temperatures up near 60 in the Fort Nelson area, also 60s, 50s and 60s there in Newfoundland and eastern Quebec. So starting out quite warm. Do we see a buildup of cold Canadian air? We'll just go quickly through the sequence. So we're up to Thursday, Friday, and the weekend. And you can see there's not much development. There are some teens and 20s in Alaska and Yukon, but those don't really come south. And you'll notice right here in Alberta and British Columbia, a very strong difference. You're seeing that downsloping as cool air moves into British Columbia and saturates and descends, and we get that adiabatic warming, very warm temperatures on the lee side of the Canadian Rockies. So this is really a very powerful storm track moving across Canada. That's not really associated with big, strong Arctic outbreaks, the development of Arctic air, because this is very disruptive to the development and maintenance of those cold air masses. And you can see up there in Alaska, there is some continued cooling, but still only looking at maybe single digits, teens, and 20s, so not really in position to come south. And the U.S., even on October 24th, looking rather warm. So we're a little bit a ways away from developing very cold air outbreaks into the U.S., but very likely it will be coming. It's just a matter of waiting for this pattern to change up a little bit. So let's take a look at our weather forecast going into tonight. There's that Pacific system now entering Utah and Arizona by tomorrow morning. By evening, it's starting to approach the Four Corners area, and you can see that pinched pattern to the thickness lines. That's an indicator that the cold front is in that area. In Texas, 85 to 92 degrees, 80s all the way up to Nebraska, Missouri, into the deep south. We're going to have that marginal risk of severe from northeastern Colorado near this frontal boundary in Nebraska and maybe up towards Rapid City. In the west, we'll see cool conditions west of the Rockies, 70s in the deserts, 50s and 60s elsewhere, and 40s in parts of the Great Basin area, Tonopah and Ely, and up in western Montana as well. And we'll have another shot of storms around Albuquerque, Santa Fe, up towards the Alamosa area. High wind and large hail will be the main concern. As we go into Thursday, this system starts to exit the Front Range and the Rockies, so pressure gradients picking up there. Very windy day for North Platte, Goodland, Grand Island, that entire area. So, Thursday, let's look at that weather. Probably the development of some showers and storms there in the Central Plains. We do have a marginal risk of severe along the Colorado-Kansas border, so we're going to focus on this area here. Some better instability in that area. Temperatures overall, 80s all the way up to Sioux City and Des Moines, 70s up to Fargo and Minneapolis, so vast area of warm advection flowing northward. As we go into Friday, some modest cooling pushes into the northern plains, temperatures in the 70s, Minneapolis to Kansas. Here comes a reinforcing shot of cold air, this wave on the backside of this main frontal system. On Saturday, we've got this warm front coming together, a weak low-level jet, and we're going to see the possibility of severe weather near that warm front, and just to the north, Arkansas, the Central Plains, the Ozarks, St. Louis, out to parts of Tennessee, and likely it's going to aggregate into a squall line. But before it does, the possibility for all hazards, including tornadoes, and I think probably the higher risk will be in Arkansas. So we'll have to keep an eye on that going into the weekend. All right, for the remainder of the period, we're looking at a cool down across much of the Midwest. Cold front drops all the way to Interstate 10, but not much in the way of cooling. Temperatures still not as low as they should be. They'll still be in the 80s. And for next week, here comes another strong Pacific front, some more cold air for the western U.S. that will push rapidly to the east. Kind of a dry front there. However, as you can see, a vast increase in showers and storms in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas for late next week. So this could be our first big possibility of precip. So this definitely bears watching, especially down there in Dallas. So we're looking at Thursday. And there's the last frame that I have. Temperatures today looking like this. These are high temperatures, rather cool up there in Montana. Most of the cool air will drive into Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. 50s and 40s in the mountains and 63 there at Denver, and gradually modifies. Some of it spreads to the east, but very little cooling, mostly 50s and 60s for highs Another shot coming in for Monday and Tuesday, back down into the 50s and 40s for highs. Overnight lows for tonight looking like this, 60s all the way up to Omaha and Columbia, Missouri, 60s for tomorrow night all the way up to Sioux Falls, and 60s all the way up to Minneapolis for lows on Friday. And finally, we get some interaction with that tropical moisture, increasing chances of rain. We start out with temperatures in the mid to upper 60s from Oklahoma southward, and even 70s on the Gulf Coast, so a sultry night for this weekend. Cooler air flows out of the northern plains, 30s all the way into Nebraska and Colorado, and here comes some more cold air for Monday, 20s and 30s. Here's the probability of precipitation, very rainy up there in Minnesota, Wisconsin for tonight. For Wednesday, good chances of rain through Wyoming, Montana, and the Dakotas. Moving north for Thursday, we finally clear out that tropical moisture, and then chances pick up for Friday and Saturday across much of the central and lower Mississippi River Valley, and shifting eastward, here comes the next system for Sunday and Monday. And that concludes this episode of Forecast Lab. Remember, you can support us on Patreon or head to weathergraphics.com and pick up a forecast book, which will help you learn a bit more. Hope you have a great middle of your week, and we'll be back on Friday for another edition. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.